Audio ya.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a este, si no me equivoco, el sexto día de mesas, espacios de discusión en torno al cine, en este espacio el que llamamos Extensión del Canvas. Para nosotros es un gusto estar aquí esta mañana con varios de los directores y directoras de nuestra competencia en Nuevos Horizontes, en donde presentamos primeras, segundas y hasta terceras películas. A esta mesa la denominamos los nuevos horizontes del cine actual o del cine contemporáneo. Y bueno, aquí para moderar, para llevar a buen puerto esta charla, nos acompaña Jordan Kronk, quien muchos de ustedes conocen. El año pasado fue jurado del festival y también estuvo involucrado en algunas de las mesas de discusión que sostuvimos en la edición 2019. Voy a leer brevemente alguna semblanza de Jordan. Bueno, él es crítico de cine y programador que radica en Los Ángeles. Sus escritos han aparecido y colabora en Art Forum, CinemaScope, Film Content, Freeze, Sight and South y en Los Ángeles Review of Books. Él es miembro de la Asociación de Críticos de Cine de Los Ángeles. Jordan, muchísimas gracias. Bienvenido. Es un placer estar aquí de nuevo contigo.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Y ahora voy a presentar a cada uno de los directores que se encuentran aquí en este momento presentando una película en la competencia. Y me gustaría primero que nada presentar a Alex Piperno. Él nació en Montevideo, en Uruguay, estudió dirección cinematográfica en la Universidad de Cine de Buenos Aires. Y sus cortometrajes han sido exhibidos en festivales como la Semana de Crítica de Cannes, FCC, en el Festival de Cine de Huesca, Sao Paulo y Biarritz, entre muchos otros. Chico Ventana es su ópera prima. Chico Ventana también quiere un submarino. Luego, me gustaría también presentar a Salka Tiziana. Ella nació en Alemania, crece entre Berlín y Barcelona. Empezó su carrera universitaria estudiando Historia del Arte y Antropología en Berlín y continuó haciendo estudios de cine en Hamburgo y en Buenos Aires. Su primer largometraje, Tal día hizo un año, fue seleccionado por el Festival Internacional de Cine de Rotterdam y la Semana de la Crítica de Berlín. Bueno, van dos primeras películas. Me gustaría también darle la bienvenida a Rafa y Janis. Ella vive y trabaja entre Ámsterdam y Atenas. Completó su educación en Bellas Artes en la Universidad de Leeds. Su obra abarca desde prácticas experimentales de imágenes en movimiento hasta de ensayos, esculturas, instalaciones ambientales y narraciones cinematográficas. Sus más recientes mediometrajes y largometrajes rondan entre estas experimentaciones. Sus películas y trabajos en video fueron proyectados en el Festival de Cine de los Países Bajos, en el Festival Internacional de Cine de Rotterdam, en el BFI, en el Festival de Curtas Vila do Conde, entre muchos otros. Calazar también es su ópera prima. También tenemos en la mesa a Jelena Maksimovic. Ella es editora y directora, nacida en Belgrado. Se graduó en edición en la Facultad de Arte Dramático en Belgrado. Ha editado películas que se han exhibido en festivales de cine como Cannes, Venecia, Berlinale, Toronto, Locarno, Rotterdam, Hot Dogs y Fit Marsella, entre muchos otros. Ha recibido numerosos premios enfocados en su trabajo como montajista. Enseña en la Facultad de Medios de Comunicación y Comunicaciones en Belgrado y en los talleres de cine de la región. Este año presentamos por segunda vez una película de Jelena. Homelands está en la selección también de Nuevo Horizonte. Me gustaría también presentar a Phillip Warnell. Él es artista y cineasta y escritor de Londres. Él produce cine y obras de arte que exploran una gama de temas filosóficos, poéticos y sensoriales, ideas sobre las relaciones hombre-animal, la imaginación política y cinematográfica, la presencia de aquello con los atributos presentes o extraordinarios y la poética del mundo corporal y de la vida circunstancial. Su trabajo es con frecuencia performativo, estableciendo elementos para el rodaje de una película como parte del evento, o lo que resulta en una interacción entre lo escrito, lo documentado y a veces circunstancias de filmación precarias. Phillip, bienvenido. Jordan, I want to thank you for all your support. Please enjoy this conversation, and we will be there at the Facebook Live. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. Before we jump in, maybe we can mention to the audience that if you want to ask a question, you can do so in the chat box there, and I'll read the questions as we go or toward the end. If you could do that in English, that would help me. I could, or I won't be able to read them. So other than that, I think we can dive right in. These are 5 very different films, so try to segue as seamlessly as possible between them. But maybe to start, 2 of the films that stood out to me as seem pretty obviously personal to their filmmakers are the films For the Time Being and Homelands by Salka, Tiziana, and Jelena Maksimovic. I was wondering, maybe we can start with Salka. If you can tell me a little bit about the personal aspects of your film, which deals with the woman coming home to visit her family. I couldn't help but notice that the woman is German and she's going home to Spain, and you're German and you live in Spain. So I figure there's probably some personal connections there. Can you talk a little bit about that to begin?
Yes, sure. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for introducing me, and hello to everybody. Yeah, the personal aspect of the film might have been the starting point for everything. This specific area where the film was shot in the Sierra Morena, it's a mountain area in the south of Spain. That's where my mother is from and my entire Spanish family. And my grandparents, they were farmers, so they owned land, they raised cattle. And when I was very young, I spent quite a lot of time there. But then when my grandparents passed away, the land was sold, the house was sold, and I didn't went back to the place till my mid-20s or my early 20s. So I guess like the most personal aspect of it is that I somehow followed what was my personal memory, which was quite a sensorial memory, I have to say, like more aspects of materiality and sounds and textures that I had in mind, and that I somehow was interested to re-encounter. And this brought me back there. But then as soon as I came back there, of course I encountered also my own position as someone who is partly familiar but also not from there. And I think this kind of close but also distant perspective gave me a much more analytical view towards the place. And so I kind of started I would say like a cartography of what this place could be for me, but also from the position of someone who's approaching it with a camera. So yeah, I would say the personal aspect is what was the door to enter this place somehow.
Right. And Jelena, with your film Homelands, is dedicated to your grandmother, about, again, a woman who's going back to kind of her family home, her grandmother's house, and it's also about the Greek Civil War and about memory and a lot of things. But can you also speak about the kind of personal aspects to the film?
Yeah, well, my idea was to make a film about the early memory from my childhood, because my grandmother used to tell me how she fought in the Greek Civil War as a very young partisan back then. And unfortunately, she had to like escape to Yugoslavia, actually, because Yugoslavian partisans were supporting Greek partisans back then. and that memory wasn't very like clear for me because she was very ill for more than 10 years and she couldn't speak anymore any language, like neither Greece or Macedonia or Serbo-Croatian. So that's kind of, this film is based on my memory practically, and my first visit the first time I was in her village, actually, I got a desire to dedicate a film to her and to all women who fought for their ideas and freedom. Yeah.
Can you maybe just briefly touch on the Greek Civil War? I know maybe a lot of our people watching aren't familiar with kind of the specifics of what was going on. I know I'm not super well versed, so this film was very enlightening, but can you just maybe briefly touch on the war and what that entailed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very specific subject, and basically it was about like fight between communists and monarcho-fascists, and also it was related to the Macedonian people who used to live in the northern part of Greece. So it's kind of taboo subject but I wasn't that interested in the war itself. I was more interested in like common people and their like their desires to still live on their own land, and their struggle. I mean, I also collaborated with a historian, a friend of mine, who helped me to get like a bit deep. it's it's not deep into the subject, but like to touch the subject and to find out certain things. But I'd rather not speak about that because I'm not that educated. Yeah.
Right. Maybe we can move to Janis Rafa, the director of Kala Azar. Your film isn't really, it's not specified that it's set in Greece, but it is Southern Europe, but it's a very different look at this part of the world. It deals with a couple who is collecting dead pets and dead animals from around Southern Europe and cremating them. I'm wondering, just as an idea, where the idea for this the film came from. I know that this disease that the title references is an actual disease that is afflicting animals in Europe. I don't know, was that the jumping off point when you discovered this, or how did it come about?
No, it was actually before. So Kalazar was almost a kind of a starting point. It was really in the roots of where this whole idea was born. But the whole film, the title, but also this idea of collecting roadkill, of cremating animals, and these deathly mapping of this deathly aura of the space, but also an understanding of the environment and of geography, of particular geography, through different kind of bodies that are abandoned, stray animals, dead or living ones, and not only through a kind of anthropocentric or logocentric kind of way of looking at landscape. It's based on a kind of research I had also in my practice, as in my art practice and my videos. But it came really through the years and through a kind of autobiographic relation with the landscape and investigating it. And slowly it became a kind of fascination of you know, what it means to give importance to the insignificant in a way. So that's it. That's the one layer to it. And all the spaces that you see, like the crematorium, the pet crematorium, and the hunters next to the crematorium, all these kind of juxtapositions in the landscape actually exist. Everything is shot in actual places, although the film is a fiction. And the title, yeah, it was something again, a kind of starting point layer. It was something that comes from a more biographical reference of Kala-Azar. It is an endemic disease that is spread through the bite of an insect that infects dogs from the blood of one to the other. And through that, it contaminates mainly stray animals if they are not protected with a particular way. And in Mediterranean Mediterranean countries suffered that, especially in the 90s, that people were really unprepared, pet owners, for example. And that was a moment we lost a lot of animals we had in my family. And I think that was a moment where I was confronted with the death of a being that we loved. And that's kind of a hidden little element in Kala-Azar, which is never explained or examined, really.
Right. And I don't know, maybe one little small personal connection. I did read that your father has a small part in the film. He plays the father of
Yes.
a couple that the couple run into at some point.
Yeah.
Can you talk about casting him? Was it just practical,
No,
or?
it is practical, but no, it's not only practical. We worked together before in other works we've done, but so somehow it was a continuation. But the parents in the film, this older couple, it is really my parents. I think it's a reflection on how I perceive them in a sense. But I think it's a continuation from past works, and that's how he ended up, being again in this film.
Right. Let's see. Let's go to Phillip Warnell, director of Intimate Distances. I didn't touch on it, but Janis has a background in a visual art, which we can come back to. I know a lot of you have various other modes you've worked in prior. A lot of these films are first features, but you've been working in different mediums prior. Phillip, you have come from the art world a little bit. You've been making short, medium length films for a little while. This film, you're from London. This film is set in Queens, though. Kind of a on the street look of Queens, and kind of deals with a casting director who starts to come up to strangers on the street and starts to talk to them about just casual questions, but then evolves into something where she's asking more about darker mentalities and criminal things that maybe people would be willing to do if they were cast in a film or in different circumstances. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about first the woman we see in the film, who's a casting director of some renown, how you met her, and then also just the idea of placing her on the street in these situations, and what you were going for as far as that goes?
No, sure. So I was over in Boston for a year at the Film Study Center at Harvard, the Sensory Ethnographic Center there, and doing research with casting agencies in New York, and getting fascinated by that kind of process that is very common there, whereby there is a kind of whole street scouting search for kind of people who look authentic in some kind of transgressive role or other. So Martha was just someone who came to me through a kind of loose network of people who'd worked previously with Albert Maysles, and she was just someone who I found very disarming in her approach to how she was very capable of opening people up very quickly, and wanted to kind of explore her method, but without, in a sense, becoming too dry, seeing her more in action, places she kind of, sort of hangs out waiting and looking for people, and really kind of following and observing her as she kind of follows and observes others, in a sense. Right. And so, yeah, she's got a real track history of working on these kind of instantaneous casting projects. where she worked on one called In Transit, I think, with Maisels, where they're actually casting on a train as they were making the film on that train. Okay. And I got really fascinated by this idea of her ability to make snap decisions on a kind of, that kind of potential and spot that in people. And the film effectively follows her around, a neighborhood where actually we're returning to the scene of a crime that is also embedded in the film through a kind of voiceover effect.
Right. And is this her neighborhood, Martha's?
No, it isn't actually. But she knows the neighborhood well as a place of work because it's a very kind of cosmopolitan area. It is certainly a place that you get a cross section at the intersection. You get a cross section of people, so it made sense for her to kind of go back to that particular spot. And Steinway Street is a great street in terms of kind of how it snaps into this sort of cultural and criminal and musical combination, whereby the pianos are assembled there, they're manufactured there. Rikers Island prison is present there, but it's also a great kind of social hub as well.
Right. And the film has a pretty unique kind of look or formal conception where the camera looks like it's positioned on various rooftops and you're kind of zooming in on Martha as she talks to these people, kind of lends a conspiratorial aspect and builds tension as she talks to these people. Can you discuss how the kind of idea for the look of the film and how you wanted to kind of frame it like that?
Yeah. I mean, there were a few things we certainly wanted to avoid, and one of those was approaching people with a film crew, and for obvious reasons, because it's that's even more disarming than being spoken to by a casting director, I suspect. And to avoid that, we kind of had to kind of load Martha with a little bit of technology that was sort of would supplement in the sense that it would bring the people she approached and encountered on mic. So she has her remit is to buddy up with people, get in their personal space, so that they, that conversation translates for the screen. And we scouted the area, found some kind of, slightly peculiar locations. I was talking to Pedro yesterday about this, how we were in a working Japanese Chinese fusion restaurant on their balcony with the restaurant open during our shoot, and but remaining unfed of the really decent looking sushi being served up. But so we were 7 stories up and on an extremely long lens, but obviously as much as possible kind of compressing, compacting that space so that we could be very, very close to the situations as they were kind of, unfolding.
Right. Well, now let's move to Alex real quick. I saved you for last because your film is maybe the most unlike the other ones, the most unique, I guess, amongst the films. So I have no segue to go into, but maybe we can just talk about the idea of the film, which is kind of set in multiple spaces that are connected via a cruise ship that a young man is working on, and he kind of discovers portals that would take him to a woman's house in Argentina, correct? And then another kind of portal that links to the jungles of the Philippines in a hut where some kind of villagers kind of stumble upon it. I'm curious if you can talk about the conception of the project, how you decided to link these spaces, and kind of the themes of class and kind of the allegorical aspects of the film, which, the people on the ship are wealthy. It's linking to poorer classes in the Philippines, and then a more intimate space with the woman in her apartment. I'm just curious if you can talk about how you went about conceptualizing the film.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry I am in a family summer house making quarantine after returning from Biarritz 2 days ago, so I have no desktops. This is like the best I can do. Sorry for all this movement. But yeah, so yes, I am from Uruguay. I live in Argentina, or at least before before COVID, I used to live in Argentina. I don't know now anymore what's happening, but here we are. What is true is that there's a ship, a ferry that goes from Uruguay to Argentina, 3 hours ship. So when I first moved to Argentina 15 years ago, I discovered myself in these two parallel lives I had. The one I left in Uruguay, which is returning now, and the one in Argentina, that was the new one, study filmmaking and so on. So this ship, it was a link between these two parallel lives. So I discovered that it was that if it was true that it could join these two lives, could join and communicate with n lives, infinite possibilities of parallel lives. So that's when I discovered it was a fantastical ship, a ghost ship, a fantastical dispositive that leads to any place. And if it was true that the ship itself, the cruise ship afterwards, it was not in the beginning a cruise ship. If it was true that you have the public place of the ship with the passengers and the private, the invisible, secret part of the crew members area, two things of a different of the same word. Uruguay, because it's in Uruguay, the apartment, it was like far and close at the same time. And the radicalization of this proceedment should be going to the antipode, to the other side of the world. So that's why, for me, it was important to go actually to China in the first moment. After, in the production stage, we decided it was Philippines, but in any way to the other side of the world. So that was the first image of the ship, of the film.
Okay. What about like the writing process? I know the film doesn't use a ton of dialogue. It's very kind of, you tell the story through images, which makes me feel like the movie maybe took shape in the editing process. I don't know if that's true. If you can talk about the writing process and how, if you piece together the film maybe through the editing process, or if it was all written as is.
Sure. For me, it's always about editing. From the very beginning, from the very first fragmented ideas. You know, I have like my Word document. When I send me always a lot of emails to myself, and I copy my notes into this document. So I have pages and pages of images and ideas and so on. So the writing stage is already editing, because it's like trying to find the secret relationship between these materials. So I am from the very beginning, and as a spectator of this film, trying to figure out which one is the core, the heart of the film, and the meaning and the relationship between these materials. So from the script writing, it's already editing, and of course it's always the same beginning of discovering materials in each stage, right? In the shooting, first looking for locations, I go to locations and scout, take pictures, and then with the pictures I understand which one is the scene. When I can understand which one, how can I frame inside the frame, how can I use the off-screen, how can I make a classical choreography within the frame. That's my approach to the mise-en-scène, to understand the scene in the real location. So again, in the shooting, and of course in the editing room, which was like a year and a half, let's say, and also in the sound post-production process, the same. It's like trying to, because it's okay, you may have the idea, but when you approach reality, it doesn't work anymore, your ideas. And in each time, for me, it's the same. I mean, I left my previous ideas and work with the material. So I don't care if I shoot a scene to tell something. When I have the materials, it only works for what I can discover of that image. I don't care if I use it for a different scene. I always use my scenes for different scenes, because I find new elements and relationships between the images and the editing.
Right. Now this is your first feature, but you're also a poet. You have background in poetry. Is that correct?
Used to be a poet when I was young.
Okay. And did that inform the film at all? It has a kind of poetic sensibility, I would say, very enigmatic and mysterious in that way. Can you talk about the connection between poetry and cinema for you, if there is a connection?
Sure. For me, it's nice because cinema has the gift of turning people very different, right? I don't know you all, but probably the approaches will be different. So I like that of filmmaking, like meeting with the people you have nothing to do. And so the films you can make depends on your background, of course. And my first taste or my first interest is not telling stories or the documentary stuff and so on, but discovering this new relationship between materials or elements that they don't have. If it's true, the quote, the surrealist quote of, I don't know how to say it in English, but the meeting of elements which have no relationship before,
yeah,
and the poetry has to do with discovering these links, these secret relationships in poetry. The same for me is in filmmaking. I find no difference between each discourse. So yes, I mean, I am interested in this mystery of the sensuality of the significance, right? Like how materials like make sense together.
Sure. A number of you have backgrounds prior to this to these films that in some cases aren't in cinema. Let's see. Well, Jelena, you do have a background obviously in cinema. You've been an editor for many years on a number of well-known films. I'm curious if you can talk about maybe your background in editing and if that experience working on those films helped you prepare to make your debut, your first feature, and maybe just talk a little bit about that process.
Okay. Of course, editing of a lot of films actually influenced my work, and actually this is my second feature.
Okay.
The first one I co-directed with a friend of mine who was also DP both in Taurunum Boy and this film. Yeah, many people think that this is my first feature because I'm the only director now, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I just wanted to mention that I had some like experience as a director before. The thing is that I think that actually we kind of carry that burden of Yugoslavia actually and wars inside that country which doesn't exist anymore. And in many films which I edited, we kind of touched certain things related to that misfortune. But here actually I had all those experiences, but I wanted to go deeper into like some questions related to, like, as I said, like common people who experience certain things and they didn't have like opportunity to do anything let's say bigger than they done. But I also think that we are not doing almost anything, even though we're trying to make some films. But I don't think that we are brave enough to do anything at the moment. And so actually that's why I made this film, and that's how I actually used the experiences from previous works, but also like I with the collaboration also with a friend of mine who's a scriptwriter, Olga Dimitrievich, who wrote that monologue at the end of the film. She actually works in theater, and I was interesting also in like having the voice of like a very like plain and simple voice of a person who also belongs to the similar context as mine. So yeah, I connected a lot of things and implemented them in this film. And also my collaborators, they added so much, yeah.
Right. So during those years editing, was your end goal always to make your own films, or did that just come about organically as you were working on other films?
No, I like being an editor, and actually that's my like favorite occupation. And this is just an excursion, you know. Like I had some personal things which I want to delve, so that's why I made those films. Yeah.
Right. And Janis, you have a background in visual art, if I'm not mistaken. Can you maybe tell us again, like similar to Jelena, just how that evolved into you wanting to make films, and if there's any correlation between your kind of visual art practice and filmmaking?
Yes, I think certainly there, you know, it's a big connection there and continuation. I entered the idea of making a feature because there was a scheme in the Netherlands where you could apply for a feature film as an artist. And I think that was what initiated for me the reason of putting all, you know, some concepts together and expanding the works I was already doing in moving image, in the arts and in short. And I'm sorry, I have a dog here and it's ready to bark, so I have to. So I was anyhow doing short and medium length films. And I was always having a tendency to use a cinematographic language. I also had a collaborator cinematographer where we always worked together for the last 8 years. You know, all that background created a sphere in which I think I was ready to expand this visual language, and also the, how can I say, all these little elements that keep repeating these rituals in a way in my practice, that I wanted to expand them and repeat them in a larger format, in a bigger world. So I think it has a clear continuation, Kalazar, to my past works. It almost kind of includes them in a sense. But it also attempts successfully or not, you know, to have a narrative format, although it's not really a linear film in a sense. It's more kind of cyclical. It closes some circles, but it was an attempt to produce a kind of more narrative format.
Okay. And Salka, I couldn't pull up any kind of interesting info about your background, but maybe you can tell us about how you came to cinema, and I don't know if you went to film school or how just tell us how For the Time Being came about as far as you directing a feature.
Yes, well, I realized For the Time Being at the art school in Hamburg. I did not go to film school, and this is also my first film or my first feature, but also I feel like before that I have done plenty of sketches somehow, like in school, like in university, that are related to what is now For the Time Being, but it's like the first proper film, I would say. So yeah, I have studied at a university that has a film department, but also painting and sculpture and scenography. So I think this, of course, gives you quite a lot of freedom in terms of how to approach the idea of filmmaking itself. There is no such thing as like clear categories. And I think that's also quite important how I think about filmmaking, that it's not about either or. We think it's interesting to combine different aspects that might be more related to documentary filmmaking or to fictional filmmaking or experimental filmmaking. And yeah, that's kind of my background. I worked on this film for almost 4 years, so it was kind of like the duration of my studies. In between, I was in Buenos Aires for an exchange, and of course I continued working from there, but yeah, it took me some time to complete it. Yes.
Well, before we move along, just a reminder to everyone watching, if you want to ask a question, you can. Unless I'm not seeing them, I don't see any questions yet. So if you want to ask a question, you can ask them to any of the filmmakers, and I'll try and ask them eventually. But we can go ahead and continue. There's a small documentary element to a couple of the films. To Homelands, Jelena's film, and also Phillip's film has, and some of Phillip's other work has kind of a documentary element. Maybe Phillip, I don't know if you want to speak at all about your relationship with nonfiction film, coming from, or you can talk about your background too, as far as you seem to come from a little bit more of an art world, and how nonfiction plays into your practice.
Yeah, just my background is in fine arts as well, although I'm now a professor of film at a university, but it's via a very circuitous route, to say the least. And as has already been said by others, you know, simply that my practice kind of was already very performative and at art school, and led into screen-based work. And yeah, you know, I think for some people, they just get drawn towards also working with a kind of crew, really, and collaborators, and opening up their practice and not kind of shutting it down to a particular discipline. And, you know, gradually that's how it worked for me. And, you know, I think maybe increasingly I've become perhaps just more and more interested in real world prompts, real world people, situations, even things perhaps that, I mean, in my work particularly, it's uncanny circumstances, living circumstances, people with very particular situations, or trying to kind of build a story with a number of kind of elements that touch upon maybe analyze cinema itself in a certain way in combination with real aspects. So you know, in Intimate Distances, I really enjoyed the idea of building a kind of, well, my research for the film was actually into the archive for someone else's film, and that kind of ended up penetrating, if you like, my filmic space. So the story, the testimony that you hear in my film is actually an audition, a failed audition for someone else's film. So it's got a kind of, you know, not so much a sort of news, or, well, it's very non-fiction, but it's sort of how cinema kind of permeates non-fiction stories, actually, because it touches upon them, it makes use of them, it takes advantage of them in many respects. Right. And I've certainly done that on a number of projects, working with people who, I don't know, someone who was convicted because they lived with a tiger and an alligator in Harlem, right, or someone who claimed to have X-ray vision in Moscow and had a clinic for that. And so these people with very bizarre circumstances, the kind of point of access for me into looking at things that are maybe science fiction or almost just unbelievable fiction, but they have that kind of real world element to them.
Right. I recommend people watch your film, Ming of Harlem, the film about the tiger you just mentioned, if they can somehow. Jelena, maybe we can talk again about your film. Also has a nonfiction element to it. Kind of starts in a narrative mode, and then as you watch some of the characters interact, it seems like maybe you're having they seem like real people, kind of maybe re-perform or restage maybe their real lives, and then from there it moves into kind of a couple archival sequences. I'm curious if you can talk about maybe working with your performers and developing their scenarios and their dialogue, and then also about the archival footage we see in the film.
Okay, so I wrote a kind of script before the first part of the shooting. The first part was the part during the winter, but when we started shooting, we realized that we are losing so much if we are too fictional. So we wanted to explore those landscapes, to meet real people, to hear the stories, to somehow to discover all those traces of the war and all those somehow to also try to preserve that feeling we had in that village, because it's like a ski center, but it's also like full of ruins, you know, and it's like full of like lost lives, but it's about to make some, I don't know, funny atmosphere with the tourists and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it was full of life in a way, but it also was full of death. So we just realized that maybe some documentary, whatever it means, but maybe some documents could help the film to actually express our feelings about that place and those people. And also, I also wanted to try certain things in this film, which I experienced in another project, but like to modify them and to like just experiment with certain forms, and that's why I decided that I should let this film be free completely from. So. The first archive is from actually we didn't have enough money to get like the archive I previously wanted, the one I found on YouTube about like Greek Civil War, but it was like it belonged to some Greek television and it was too expensive. Okay. And we were like, okay, we're gonna continue searching for the right images for that film, because obviously if we cannot afford something, then it's not proper for that film, you know. So we continued exploring, and actually we found out that some kind of company in our country in Serbia have some footage from refugees, actually from the Greek Civil War, which were shot during Tito time and during like period of Yugoslavia. And I actually realized while watching it that it's much more right, like suitable for the film, that it's like those are like real images or like of modest village people, and I realized that it's much more powerful for me to have those images in the film than like the partisans only and stuff like that. So and the next block of archive is like was shot on Super 8, and it's archive from my it's archive filmed in one part of Belgrade, which is called Zemun, and it's my hometown actually.
Oh.
So and that's the place where my grandmother also used to live. So I decided to film in my neighborhood, and also to somehow to try to connect those spaces which she's not able to see anymore to the spaces she wasn't able to see anymore from her early adulthood. So I wanted to connect those two things somehow in a form of a dream. So yeah.
Alex, again, I don't think we mentioned the name of your movie. It's called Window Boy Would Also Like to Have a Submarine. You mentioned when we were talking before about the sound a little bit, which it has a very unique sound design, as does Janis's film. But Alex, maybe you can talk about the sound design of the film and how you conceptualized it, because it's set, obviously we talked about how it's set in multiple locations, one of them being kind of the hull of a ship. So it's very, very unique kind of oral atmosphere.
Open question. Sound design regarding the ship or in general? I mean,
in general, but yeah, the ship is very unique sounding.
Why? No, I mean,
I don't know. Just it seems very detailed and kind of immersive. Yeah, I'm just wondering if there was any extra effort to really make that stand out, and then the differences between the locations are very stark as far as the sound.
Extra effort, always, of course, always. Yes, I mean, I never been before in a cruise ship until I made the scouting 8 years ago. I went with a DOP friend of mine to see how it was being on board a cruise ship, and also how it looks like, how it sounds, how it works, and so on. So we have that first approach where I understood that I hate passengers. I realized that when I was framing, I was feeling so bad when I see all that guys are taking pictures and so on. So I discovered that if I move the camera and take away these people, I could breathe again happily. So because then it appears the cruise ship as a landscape, as a geometrical plain landscape. It's like a mix between Disneyland and Guantanamo. It's something so strange. But when you take out the people, you have this plain, silent place, which has a lot of contrast with the background, with the real landscape. And if you put a real worker, walking around this place, which is not from him, something nice starts happening. And of course, the sound has a lot to do with that, because you have to create the environment. And I always like to work with a very strong off-screen, an off-screen in sound, but also in image, which may get inside the frame and also link one frame to another one. And of course, in this film, one space to another one. So regarding the sound in the ship, we had the experience of a short film I made with these materials of the scouting before, and we worked with two sound directors, Lucas Larriera from Argentina and Pablo Lamar from Brazil, Paraguay. So we had plenty of environment. The environment of the cruise ship was very artificially constructed with a lot of layers, always a lot of layers, engines and so on. And also to feel this strange environment, kind of not realistic, but also like a wide ambient, right? So on one hand that, I don't know if I answer the question, but also the big question for me was how to link the spaces, right? The apartment, the ship, Philippines. And from the very beginning, it was clear that the sounds play its part, of course. But it was not until the editing and the sound design when we fully understood how it made sound. But also, I mean, for me, the most important thing to say here is that, of course, sound is part of the script. I mean, the script that always rewrites itself, right? So yes, I don't know how much what's to say about I mean sound design. It has to do a lot with the moment, with the specific moment of the material of the sound and in the image. I thought it has to do with an abstract decision, but in the end of the day, it has to look with a very precisely way of seeing the material. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe Janis, the same question. Your film kind of has enclosed spaces when they're in the van together. The couple, a lot of animal noises and things like that. Can you talk about conceptualizing the sound? And there seems to be like an effort to make the film very visceral and animalistic in a way. I mean, I'm just curious how you approach the sound.
Yes, I think it's one point is similar to what Alex mentioned, which is trying to connect spaces, meaning that because in our film in Calazar, the camera always was looking away from the action, and also the action never was based in dialogue. I mean, it was more visual rather than textual, the information you would get. And the camera always had the tendency to be very much on textures, on close objects. I just have a mosquito going around there. There
all
you
the
are.
animals
All the Calazar mosquitoes here with me. So I think one reason was to try to bring into the scene all these other inhabitants of these locations we were shooting, and that was also the animalistic elements of these situations, either sounds or even textures, like the smelling, peeing, leaking, all these things that they are very much have to do with closer contact, or putting your observation a bit lower and closer than we are get used to. So I think that's what there was the one thing that the sound was served in the film, and the other is that it kind of trying to relate to the muteness that the film is kind of unraveling slowly, that there is a certain silence in the film, like a kind of the muteness of the natural world as we perceive it. So there is all these other sounds, the natural sounds that come. And the sound design was also used, and that comes back to Alex, that as a way to connect locations, because the film is so much broken down, like a scene was shot in a way that it never has a general shot. So you never really understand where you are and how, if this person is next to the other. So in order to trying to connect these spaces, an extra effort is made through the sound, but that was also intentional, you know, to stay in this kind of form of cinematography, the film.
Right. Phillip, I was wondering if you could talk about the actual shooting process. You're going into this project assuming certain things might occur when Martha is speaking to strangers, but yeah, you don't know. So I'm curious how that developed, how long you shot for, how many more people were talked to that we don't see in the film, and yeah, just getting her to get these people to start talking in the way that you want to for the film, or if that just is something that happened organically as she was spoken, then the theme kind of coalesced around that later.
Yeah. Well, we shot, it was only within just over one afternoon, really. It was
really?
very, very quick. And that was for all sorts of reasons, logistical reasons, but also to ensure that there was a kind of focus to the material, that it very definitely didn't extend through time. It was more about a kind of real-time, you know, psychogeographic search on the street. She's a flaneur, she's looking around, she's exercising her sensibility in a sense. So we worked very, very quickly. It must have been about a 7-hour shoot. And in fact, I think all of my films have been made very, very quickly for reasons both because of my interest and beyond my control often, because it's so expensive to bring a film crew together, unfortunately. And yeah, we've included, therefore, probably 50% of the material we shot. So it's a wonderful shooting ratio to have ended up with. But and they were pretty much, you know, there's another kind of casting in a sense when one selects with these kind of random encounters, when you then make a selection yourself based on Martha's initial selection. And I like that kind of layering effect that comes through, yeah, sort of a constant editing and re-editing of material and potential and selection somehow. And you know, I think our selection was based on how the kind of humanity, Martha's humanity, and the kind of depth of conversation around these kind of dark spaces that people feel they might or could or have inhabited, how those kind of were unearthed in a sense. And you know, yeah, made the selection pretty much based on that. But maybe if I may, I'd just add that ours was a film that during the shoot left us with very little atmospheric or environmental sound. Actually, we had nothing to go on. We simply had these dialogued, you know, budded up, mic'd conversations. And I worked with a sound designer called Phillip, a Swiss Greek brilliant sound designer, but based in London. And we had to more or less rebuild the space that was flooded with mini micro narratives because we had such a wide camera. So there was all sorts of potential points of interest within the frame at any given moment. And we really had to do a job working with Foley and Wild Track to kind of almost make selections based not just on what Martha was doing, but to kind of build these sort of little kind of incidental moments where somehow your attention might be grabbed by someone who's doing something, and it almost confers a sort of sense of suspicion on the space in its entirety. You start wondering if someone is placed or if they're going to become part of the screen encounter in a wider perspective.
Right. And you mentioned Harvard before, sensory ethnography lab, which those films have a very unique sound design. Did that,
Yeah.
I don't know if that influenced you at all? I mean, if the films aren't your film isn't very similar to those necessarily, but maybe the sound kind of influenced you?
Not really, although it was certainly something that maybe being in that environment is sort of you're inevitably influenced by where you are, who's around you, and you're always kind of, you know how it is, you're looking people up and finding out about the work. So I think working with people like Lucy and Castaigne Taylor, who work a film like Leviathan, and thinking about sound as a very, or the completeness of an environment as a very visceral soundtrack is certainly something that you know, I was happy to take on board, and the exposure to working in that kind of context was very useful for this project to kind of open it up in some ways.
And Salka, we can go back to your film for 1 second. Can you tell us a little bit about the performers we see in the film? I'm assuming they're actors. Your film seems a little more narrative driven, but maybe they're not. Can you talk about the mother and the daughter we see, and then about the father who's kind of like an absence who we don't see, and how you just work with the actors or performers and who they are, where they came from?
Yes, well, I mean, there's only one professional actress in the film. The others have never been in front of a camera before. So yeah, the mother of the young boys who drives there, like the foreigner, she is an actress from Germany. And the reason why she is that is because that was the only character that I wrote from the very beginning, because I knew I wanted to approach this place and to create this encounter, but I needed like a fictional character from the outside. And all the others, well, especially like the mother and the daughter, I know them since many years, and I was just interested in working with them as people, as persons, which is a very important aspect to me in the whole making of a film. Like, not only people in front of the camera, but also behind. Like, I work with the same people for years, and like this kind of intimacy is very important to me. And also with the people, like with the non-actors in front of the camera, what I was interested in was that they brought like an own dynamic, which was not created by me, but like which I had observed before and which I thought was beautiful. And so in the end, it was more about creating a way to put, or to gather these people together who I was interested in for different reasons, like the kids, and then the mother and the daughter were mother and daughter in real life, and then this woman from the outside. So I was more interested in creating like a framework so they can meet, so that the encounter itself was a real encounter in the film. And yeah, you say that like the film was more like narrative driven, and I would say yes and no. Because yeah, of course, on the one hand, I created this, or I invited the audience to kind of follow this encounter. But at the same time, what was the starting point, and what is also, like, I would say, the other half of the film is kind of like this spatial experience and this getting to know and to confront yourself with this place, with the human impact on this place, also what this kind of surrounding does with the people who inhabit this place. And I think that the combination of these both aspects, on the one hand, this very we follow humans and their interactions and relations, and then on the other side we have this this relation to a habitat. And for me, this is important to have both of them, because I feel like the way our relations, like our interpersonal relations as humans, the way they are defined has a lot to do how we interact with our surroundings. And so it's not two different things. And the way we take care or not take care of where we live, and so I feel that this was very important to have like these two different approaches. And of course, I mean, I'm still a human being, and this is still anthropocentric view on it. But I felt like I needed to have like this humans to follow to get there somehow, and to find a way to question this gaze as well, as a human.
Right. And your film premiered in Rotterdam, if I'm not mistaken. I thought maybe we could go one by one to end as we're winding down. A number of your Janis's film premiered in Rotterdam. Alex's film premiered in Berlin. So right before the pandemic, some of you guys are premiering these films. I'm just curious if we can start with Salka, about premiering a film right before something like this happens, and then how it's affected the life of the film. Normally, all your films would probably be screening at various festivals in the spring and summer. Some of them did in virtual festivals. But I'm curious if you can talk about how it's affected its life after its premiere, and how like distribution wise, if it's had difficulties because of not being able to be shown places, if it's hindered that at all. And then also just what you've been doing, what you've been working on in the last few months, as you haven't been able to travel or do much.
Yeah, well, I mean, the start in Rotterdam was very fruitful, I would say. It was from as event itself, and then I was lucky that there were like a few more German festivals afterwards, so it was not like immediately. Right. But of course, then the film went kind of to sleep for half a year. And now I feel like it's slowly awakening. And I mean, this, for example, right now in Mexico, I mean, it's a pity not to be able to be there, but at least they try to make like a theatrical part of the festival. And there are like some other places where they still try. Yeah. So for me, I feel like it's not yet over, but I mean, of course, I could not, I don't know how it would have been differently. We just got a small distributor from the US, for example, in Rotterdam. But I think for the US, like, I don't see any chance right now. I don't want to be pessimistic, but well, I mean, you might know it better how it's going on. But so yeah, I feel that it could have been different. But as I already said, this is my first film, and I feel like I'm very happy that it actually went the way or is still going. So and I think like it's not, I mean, next year there will be there's still a chance that it will continue, and we have some more festivals this year left. So but especially like with the projects, I mean, for me, I was in the middle of a new research, and then I had to cancel everything, and I feel like I'm not able to continue this project, because I mean, it is based in Madrid, and Madrid is now again closed. So like, of course, you have to somehow accept that there are some limitations right now. But I also feel like as soon as you let something go, there's space for another thought maybe, and then some new things happen. So I feel like I would just like go with it this way.
Right.
So
And Janis, your film also premiered in Rotterdam, won a prize, I believe. can you also just talk about how it's affected the kind of trajectory that you would have anticipated, distribution, and then also what you've been working on, or if you've been able to work on anything during quarantine?
Yes, I think having a first time, first feature, you never know how it could have been. So that's helpful for sure, not knowing. We had the premiere, and I think that's something to get the vibe and, to understand how the film works in a bigger screen and with a bigger audience. And then we were invited to go to the new director's new directing films in New York, and it was just the moment, we were flying like 4 days later, and that was when everything went, got started here in Greece. And since then it travels to festivals, and of course there are online meetings and talks and Q&As, but I think there is a certain, you don't get the vibe and you don't understand how the film is perceived.
Yeah.
Maybe if you get an award, maybe you feel a little bit of something in your bones, and then that's it. So it's a very distant, really the film travels by itself, and I don't know, actually what the life of the film and how it's communicated. And then we had a release in the Netherlands. That's the only release we have so far, and that happened in the summer in Amsterdam and in other cities in the Netherlands. Again, I was not invited to be there. We preferred to keep it, to try to be connected from distance with the cinemas there. Not a lot of people were able to visit. It was again a very kind of closed viewing in a sense.
Yeah.
So that leaves a lot of space to work in one way or another, like figuring out how you can work with a family at home. But at least, you find a way to keep creativity and start new projects and pick up from there. I think for me from the lockdown, it was mainly a moment where I started doing applications again either for a new script, for smaller projects and video works. And that's how now what I'm carrying on and continuing.
Right. And Alex, your film was also selected for New Directors, New Films, which didn't happen. The film premiered in Berlin, though, in the New Encounter section. That was a little closer to when lockdown happened. Can you also just talk about how COVID's kind of affected the distribution possibilities of the film and what festivals it's gone to and things like that?
No, I mean, Berlin was really wonderful. Berlin, all the good old times in Berlin was like meeting the audience, was understanding that the film was not discovering the film, but actually discovering the audience and the interlocutors. And that was so amazing. And I was so surprised because I thought the film was kind of, this film will be for filmmakers. And then it was, no, not at all. It was from real audience, real people. And that for me was so amazing. So after that good experience, we have this nightmare, right? I had a ticket on my hand to go to New York also as Janis, to the new director's new film. But it didn't happen. And then a lot of festivals didn't happen, or happened online, or happened with little dignity or whatever, doing the best. It was new for all. But the lack of experience of the online screenings was for me very sad, right? Like being here is nice, but I didn't see you films of all you. I didn't meet you. I am really looking forward to those moments, right? Like the real experience on one hand. And also what I feel is like quite stupid saying, no, I won't give you the screening of the film for friends, but wait for the online screening. It's like, I feel so stupid. I really don't understand if I should give, my sales agent would hate me, but I really don't know what to do, because I should why not give the link to my friends, give the link for people, because what we miss is the experience and the theater experience, and we don't have that. I mean, I won't do that, Bowder, sorry, the sales agent, I won't do that, but I really missing the encounter with people, right? Like with the interlocutors. And also, I have just arrived from Biarritz when we have real festival, which was quite nice, was incredibly nice, let me say. And I was really missing so much of that experience. So regarding distribution, we have like the VOD from Rotterdam, right? Online in the Netherlands. We will be releasing the film in the theaters in Uruguay this year. 30% of of people in the theater, which is Uruguay. We have very few people in Uruguay, so imagine in the theaters. So
it's safe that
strange.
way.
I don't know. I mean, I tried not to think more about this and start with my new project.
Yeah. And you're
so
able to.
I'm writing my next film and trying to surf this strange wave we are all surfing. But my experience, what I feel is that we lost the train goes just once, right?
Yeah.
And we lost it. But it's better to lose this train that the other people really suffering. So what can we do?
It's true. Yeah, no, I saw the film in Berlin. That's why I was asking about the sound, because I was lucky to see the film in a theater where it's very immersive, which I don't know if that's translating to.
Can I say something more about the sound, which I thought afterwards?
Sure. Yeah.
No, because I kept thinking, because I didn't like the answer I gave you. But I think that I have two main opposite approaches. One is following the Bressonian quote of, if you can do it with sound, don't use the image. For me, it's like a very important a law. And then the opposite one is that everything's a mess, nothing works in the editing, we need to fix it, and then the sound triggers as a new possibility. I mean, something I would never thought about in the script appears like in the hurry of trying to figure out how to solve the scenes. So that's two different approaches. For me, it's like my main approaches for sound.
No, I was gonna mention Bresson actually, but I thought it might be a little bit of a reach. But yeah, I think the way you transition between the scenes via sound is similar, or maybe it recalls Bresson in a way.
For me, it's very important to be clean, to be like the less the better.
Right. Agreed. And Philip, I saw your film online via Fid Marseille, I believe. I don't know if the film
Vision du Réal.
Oh, Vision du Réal,
yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if that was the premiere or not, but can you talk about where the film first debuted, and then how it's the life as it's taken shape?
Yeah, premiered in Vision du Réal, and I think that was one of the first festivals that was completely online. And it's been in Valdivia, Open City Docks in London, and as well as Black Canvas has got some screenings lined up in Argentina and Colombia and the Biennale at the end of October. But it's never had I feel it's been a bit catastrophic for my film. It's never had an auditorium screening. It's never been in the cinema. I almost feel it's a completely unpremiered. Since I have I think it's a beautiful DCP of the film, and I sincerely hope that I'll get the opportunity to see it one day, because of course, a lot of the investment as a filmmaker is partially in how the thing is going to blow up, and and making that sense of auditorium work. So I'm yet to encounter my own project in that respect. I also had a big exhibition in Scotland cancelled that the film was going to be kind of foregrounded in as an installation work. So that's been put back a couple of years. And I don't know, I mean, I really hope that some festivals in 2021, if things do, come back to normal, they reconsider works that have only ever been seen online, because it's really like, another life, isn't it, really? As
definitely.
As so many people have alluded to.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear how so many of us have had to go back to writing, applying, and and exploring future pathways for projects. And like many of the others, I'm doing that, and I'm still working on this kind of elusive, evasive figure of criminality and who that might be and how I might engage with that, and looking at avenues to kind of pursue it in a sense.
Was there any consideration of not like when you're invited to Visions du Real to not show it and wait and see what happens, or was it like I'm invited and we'll do it this way because that's how it's going to work from now on?
Yeah, I mean, no, of course the thought is there that you could just hold back, put it to one side and wait for a real circumstance. But, you know, I mean, I kind of had a hunch that this wasn't something that was going to disappear overnight. And, you know, when you make a work, it's with a lot of urgency, of course, and you finally hit the right deadline and get the go ahead. And I think I made the right decision to kind of release the film. It's had a lot of feedback. It hasn't struggled with, you know, distributing in the online sense, and actually with the review that comes, you learn so much that actually gives you momentum moving forward. So I think I've done the right thing, but can't wait for the day, you know.
Right. And Jelena, for Homelands, same question, I guess. What the life of the film's been like for you, screening online? Has it had in-person screenings? Yeah, just talk about how that's worked for you and what you've been able to work on in the time being.
Yeah, we had premiere on Film Marseille like 2 months ago, or at the end of July actually, and I'm not sure that that film even exists, you know, because I mean, I was really somehow disappointed because I couldn't hear anyone talking about my film. I couldn't see any face after the screening, you know. We were not able to go to France at the moment. So but I mean, some other films are not even out, you know. They're still in like process of waiting. Some of the films I edited, so I'm kind of lucky, but also unlucky. But never mind. I mean, there are some festivals, and maybe, I mean, also we've been invited to Biennale, but we won't be able to travel there. So I mean, maybe next year something's gonna happen. And of course, there's gonna be premiere in Serbia at the beginning of December, and it's really important for me to be live, but who knows. But also there are some more like serious topics going on now, so it's nothing. I mean, I just live normal life and work every day a lot, and that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, whatever. Something's gonna change, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Well, I'm happy that Black Canvas is screening all your films and that a select number of people in Mexico City can see them in theaters. But then a larger portion of the audience can see them online in Mexico. So that's nice. One perk. But I want to thank all 5 of you for coming on and sharing your thoughts and sharing your films. I hope everyone will check them out if they haven't. And if they have already not able to at this point, they can check them out at other festivals, Biennale, a couple you mentioned, and they will continue to screen around at other festivals. So I hope people will keep an eye out for them. But yeah, thank you for your time. And I hope you guys have a good life with your films moving forward. And hopefully I can see some of them in a theater in the near future.
Thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
guys.
Thank you. Keep safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.